Well, welcome to Money Market, a Bank of Tampa podcast. We highlight the businesses, expert business advice, the local economy, and points of interest in the Tampa Bay market. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And please be sure to share this episode with a friend or colleague. I am your host, Owen LaFave, the Pinellas County Market President for the Bank of Tampa, Tampa Bay's oldest and largest community bank. I'm excited about today's guest. He spent time in the Army disposing explosives that could blow up buildings, and now he spends his day building buildings. We're joined today by Jeff Wherry, the Florida healthcare leader for JE Dunn Construction. So welcome to the podcast.
Perfect. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. So what was explosive disposal like? I mean, that's fascinating.
It was an interesting thing. So, when I joined the Army, I wanted to do something that I couldn't do outside of the Army. And
without getting arrested, probably.
Absolutely. And you're looking at it and you're talking to recruiters, you're seeing what you're going to do. And that popped up, and it was right after the movie The Hurt Locker came out and everything.
Sure,
and so I saw that and I was like, well, this seems kind of cool. And anybody who's actually in the field will hate me for saying that I did it because of The Hurt Locker, but that is part of why I did it. But it was a fantastic experience, learning the insides and outsides of every single device and IED and weapon of mass destruction that's ever kind of been built is such a unique experience that I could never change, and it made me who I am today.
Very cool background. I mean, not many people can say they've done that, and it's I can imagine that was a little nerve-wracking, but exciting.
Absolutely.
So let me offer you a belated welcome to Florida. I know you've been here a year now, and you're heading up JE Dunn's healthcare group in Florida. So, I mean, it seems like JE Dunn has been here for forever, maybe a better part of a decade in Tampa, but I know the history in Florida is longer than that.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. So our company started in 1924 in Kansas City, Missouri, but we've been here in the state of Florida for 35 years. But we didn't have a brick and mortar office until 2015. So we sent down some of our team from Atlanta to start our office here in 2015. And they started at the Morton Plant Hospital doing a large expansion for them. But we had been in Florida through Miami all the way up to Panama City Beach building healthcare facilities since 1989. So it is kind of our 35th anniversary here, our 100th anniversary nationwide. And then we're coming up on 10 years here with a brick and mortar office.
So is there some crazy story? I mean, 100 years is a lot of history. I mean, it's right around the Great Depression. I mean, were you guys building distilleries for the Prohibition or something?
No, but we did grow our company by helping the war effort. So JE Dunn started in 1924, right after World War I. It started as a small construction company in Kansas City. And as World War II started, both of our founders' kids were serving in the war effort, and I think they were both in the Army. One might have been in the Navy, but how we kind of grew and got a lot of good prosperity, I guess, would be building a ammo depot for the federal government. And we did it 100% at our cost. There was no fee associated with it, not necessarily the best business decision, but it really put JE Dunn on the map nationwide. I think FDR was the president, and he, was very thankful for the company, and it really started our growth in Kansas City and outward.
Very cool. So walking onto a construction site or any tense situation, is that a piece of cake because of your background in dealing with explosives?
100%. So everybody kind of says that I pretty much have a cool demeanor most of the time. I don't get too stressed out. I think part of that is that training where, in explosive ordnance disposal, if you make one mistake, that could be the last thing. So you're never really too worried about it. Now anything is solvable. If something's going wrong on a job site or with a project or an owner's upset, we can always figure out a way to fix it. We can figure out a way to get back on track. That's not always the case if you're dealing with an explosive. But thankfully, we're building buildings now and not having to worry about them blowing up.
Ice in your veins. So when you go to see a scary movie with your wife, she jump and she wonders, like, what's the matter with you? Are you paying attention?
I wish I didn't jump during scary movies. Man, those always scare me.
They still get me too. Good jump scares is good.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about healthcare, real estate, and construction. So what kind of projects are JE Dunn working on now?
So throughout the state of Florida, we've got 5 active healthcare projects going on. Anything from behavioral health hospitals that we're building throughout the state, inpatient rehab hospitals. We're also building some larger hospitals for nonprofit healthcare providers and for-profit healthcare providers as well. But outside of healthcare, we also do multifamily construction, hotels, office buildings, municipal work, and K through 12 work here locally in Tampa. That's kind of what we've really been focusing on for the last 10 years, but we're looking to grow that throughout the state of Florida in the next 10 years.
Well, so having exposure to the rest of the state, and I know JE Dunn is, you mentioned nationwide too. How does the Tampa Bay market compare to other markets within the state or nationally? And then maybe if you could just expand that to Florida too.
Yeah. So I think that what we kind of think of in Tampa is we kind of look just at the Tampa-St. Pete region. But when you look at all the other metropolitan areas throughout the country, they're much larger and they span much further than that. So you're looking at places like Dallas-Fort Worth, where that's a 2-hour circular kind of place that has 7 million people, 8 million market. People in it. Well, Tampa Bay, in the Tampa Bay region, if you have that same 2-hour circle, you've got Orlando included. You have Fort Myers. You have Citrus County, everything around that. And that's even bigger than the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So we are a huge metropolitan area within 2.5 hours of Tampa that really we never consider that when we're ever just talking about how big of a place we are. We just sprawl out way further.
Interesting. So is that, from a national perspective or a national contractor? So us being very here, we have a tendency to be very myopic and think of like, only Tampa, only Clearwater, only St. Pete, which, it's all part of the Tampa MSA. And depending on how you define it, so if you like at the downtown or a Tampa Bay partnership, they include 9 counties in their assessment of what the MSA is. But nationally, when people look at the market, do they take in consideration, Orlando, Naples, Fort Myers?
I think so. Whenever you're working in construction, even if a company has an office in Tampa, they may be doing work in Orlando. If they have an office in Orlando,
away, right?
Orlando, they're doing work here. But most of the time nationally, before I really started working in the Tampa area, I never realized how close Orlando was. So I think it is kind of slept on nationally that we are such a big area and that it's not just the 600,000 people in Tampa.
Right.
It's 4 million people in Tampa. It's 4 million people in Orlando. It's 1.5 in Fort Myers. And it's all of that in this one big community.
Well, and I think maybe you've been here long enough to appreciate the fact that even while we're here, we don't necessarily consider us a part of one community, which is bizarre. Absolutely. Which is all those things you just said about, the strength of all the different municipalities and, the 3, 4, 5 million people that live in this area is because everybody views this as one market.
Oh, absolutely. It's so crazy. When I moved here and, one of my coworkers lives in South Tampa and he said, that's absolutely where you have to live. You have to live in South Tampa. And I was like, should I go look at St. Pete? He's like, no, nobody goes to St. Pete. And then one of my other coworkers lives in St. Pete and he said, nobody goes to Tampa. I never went across that bridge growing up, and it was vice versa. So it's 2 communities right here, but in the eyes of business, they're really connected, especially when people make that decision to move here and see what they can grow.
It's an 8-mile bridge. It's I don't know why people get hung up with crossing the water, but it might as well be a different state. It's silly.
Absolutely.
But now coming from Nashville, so you've got experience in another very fast growing market. We call this the podcast, the Money Market Podcast, because it's play on words, not only the bank product, but because we're in one of the fastest growing markets in the country. So is Nashville. How would you compare the 2 markets?
Vastly different. So I think it is, Nashville is about 1 million less people in the MSA that they have there. There's not too much else in the center of Tennessee outside of Nashville, Davidson County, Williamson County. But the growth that has happened in the last 10 years is very similar. 15 years ago in Nashville, you would never go to hang out on Broadway Street. You would never do that. And then
they're just very touristy, right?
Not even back then. It was not a safe space to go. It wasn't something that you really wanted to do. And then after the recession in 2008, it started to get built up. And now, I think it was a year and a half ago, at one point we had 34 tower cranes that could be seen from our office in Nashville.
That's
that
incredible.
Was everything that was being built there. And that skyline has completely changed. You're seeing that same thing here in Tampa, where Water Street was nothing when Amalie Arena was built.
Yep.
It was just open land. And when I moved here, I would have never thought that was the case. And that's
at one point in time, it was all just factories, and half of them were closed down.
Absolutely.
Warehouses, yeah.
So it's definitely crazy how similar they are and on a growth pattern. And that's why you see so many developers flocking here. You see construction booming in both places, and everybody's moving here.
Well, Nashville stole Steven Stamkos from us. So I don't know if you're a hockey fan or not, but I'm not.
I'll say I was a Predators fan when I was up in Nashville, but I kind of adopt the NHL team of wherever I live. So now I am a Lightning fan.
We welcome you. We welcome you.
And so this is the first time that I've been angry at the Predators. But hopefully the Lightning can recover and have a good season.
No, I'm excited about the season, and it was sad to see him go, but I think it's probably best for the organization and best for him. I mean, he got paid, so
absolutely.
I'd love to ask you which municipalities are the easiest to work with, but I don't want to get you in trouble. So, yeah. how would you define a municipality that is developer builder friendly?
Oh, I'd say if they're willing to communicate with you and work with you, every municipality has their own intricacies. So there's not going to be one that is just absolutely miserable to work with and one that is the easiest ever, especially when you've got a bigger city. Sometimes you can go into really small towns. They have really small building departments and it's a breeze because you may know more about the building process than their team. And so they ask for your help. But in these bigger cities, everybody's got their own intricacies. Thankfully, we have so much experience in the area that it's become easy to work with everybody because we know their teams, we know how to get the permits put through, and we know what their inspectors inspect. And that's truly the key to making it simple.
Okay. It seems like there has been just a proliferation of hotels or hospitals and new beds and outpatient surgical centers that just seem to come out of nowhere. Now I know, Florida's experienced just exponential growth, so it would make sense that we need additional, medical services and hospitals to take care of those additional people that are in the market. But is something happened that has kind of freed the way for new construction?
Yeah. So in the 1970s, there was a law put in place called that required what they call a certificate of need to be required in order to build any kind of healthcare facility.
Right.
So that was your rehabilitation centers, your behavioral health centers, acute care hospitals, like your standard hospital, and nursing homes, anything like that.
So anything that was patient care. So you need a certificate of need.
Anything that had patient care, you had to have a certificate of need. And that was an arduous process where you had to go to the state and justify the reason why these beds were needed for the population that was currently there. There's positives to that, to make sure that there's not too much competition and people are pulling away the few healthcare providers we have from one place to another, and so that you can properly staff that. But there's also drawbacks to it because it does limit competition. In 2018, Ron DeSantis signed a bill to start to repeal the certificate of need requirement. So mid-2019, acute care hospitals no longer needed a certificate of need, and in 2021, any of the kind of specialty hospitals no longer needed that. So for the last 4 or 5 years, it's kind of been open market for hospitals and healthcare facilities to be built. With that, you've started to see businesses and health facilities kind of make a business need for it with the future projected growth. And it may not necessarily be needed for the community right now, but if it's needed in 5 years, they can get the ball rolling currently instead of having to go through that governmental process to get it approved.
Well, I tell you, everything takes so long, right? To buy the land, get the entitlements, get the approvals to construct it. It's going to take 5 years once you decide, okay, we're going to buy this piece of property and build.
Absolutely.
So that would make sense to be able to get ahead of that curve. How does Florida compare to other markets? Are they similar in that sense, or is Florida unique?
So I think with the certificate of need being repealed fairly recently, you're seeing way more acute care hospitals being built. Okay. We like to call them greenfield hospitals, just large buildings on brand new sites. So you're seeing that way more here than you are other places. In other states, you see a lot more of additions, renovations, because hospitals have been standing for a lot longer in these areas. And then you also still have about 26 states, I believe, that have a certificate of need requirement. So they don't have as much competition there. And it's a very long process to get those approved. So you're seeing a whole
pretty much
lot.
Like half and half.
Yeah, you're seeing a whole lot more capital invested into these growing areas, like in Pasco County. It seems like every health system is building a hospital up there currently, or in the plans to build a hospital in that area, which is great for me because I live in Pasco County and I want my daughters to have the best health care that they can, and we don't want to have to drive 50 miles to get to it.
Sure.
So I really appreciate that hospitals are being built up there, but you definitely see that right here in the Tampa Bay region a whole lot.
Now, does JE Dunn also do design work or just construction?
We do. So most of the time in the healthcare space that we partner with a local design firm to kind of provide a design build delivery of a construction project. But we also do have now internal design teams that can take us 100% internally from a concept and an idea all the way through completion and a health system seeing patients.
I can imagine. Is it easier working with your internal team because they? Obviously you're vertically integrated.
It's a lot easier to get mad at your internal team. So I don't know if it's necessarily easy. I've got so many great relationships with architecture firms and engineering firms around that those are some of my best friends, and I'd love working with them. When it's internal, I kind of have to rule a little bit more with an iron fist. And so sometimes I like working with the exterior partners. It definitely makes it more fun.
I will always say to the team here that because we spend so much time together, it's like family, right? Yep. And it's the people, family is the people you treat the best and the worst because you're just comfortable and you don't think of the negative consequences. You just emotionally respond.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that being a little bit of a challenge to navigate through. What types of design and construction projects are owners looking at in the market today?
So in the healthcare space specifically, you're seeing a whole lot of behavioral health hospitals being built. Back in the 70s and 80s, states pretty much ran their mental health care, and they used to call them psychiatric hospitals. And since states have moved away from that and gone with a private method, behavioral health hospitals have started to be built all over the place, especially with the need. You also see in the state of Florida inpatient rehab facilities. We have an aging population. People move here to retire, and there is a need. The villages have multiple rehab hospitals that are being built for people when they break a hip.
Just got a Hooters approved, which I found interesting.
There we go.
Who's going to staff it is what I'm wondering about.
That'll be interesting. Maybe it'll be a village Hooters, and it's going to be fun. You see that, and then you also notice that people don't like to travel for their healthcare. So you're starting to see a whole lot of really small facilities start to open up. So these micro hospitals, freestanding emergency departments, these outpatient clinics that are really right outside of neighborhoods, outside of big community developments.
So what do the industry metrics tell you? That people only want to drive 20 minutes?
It's about 5 miles.
Okay, all right.
So that is typically, weirdly enough, that is the circle that most people live in if they don't have to travel further than work. So they want to stay within 5 minutes or 5 miles of home, and that's really what health providers are trying to do.
Okay. What about materials and just construction methods? It's interesting. Maybe materials have been modified and improved, but construction more so than any other industry, it feels like we've done the same thing for the last 50 years. It seems very traditional, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of innovation. Keep hearing about innovation, but it doesn't actually seem to be implemented on the site.
Yeah, so you're seeing a ton of innovation. We're doing a whole lot of prefabrication, where we're trying to remove construction from the site in order to provide better safety, quality, and speed to market. So we're not having to do it all right there. But metrics show that construction efficiency hasn't improved in the last 50 years. And that's partially a result to our weakening workforce. We moved away from the trades being the most important thing. College was pushed for so long that now our tradespeople are few and far between. And we're going to have that gap. And we're trying to hopefully get rid of that gap by bringing a new group of tradesmen in and pushing people through that training. But that's definitely what you see. It seemed like everybody was a part of a labor union or a bricklayer union back in the 1950s and 60s when we were really building the infrastructure of this country, but we've moved away from that. And so even though technology has improved, the efficiency hasn't.
It's unfortunate. As a country, everybody had to have a college education, and that was the big push. So we pushed away from the trades. How do you get younger people interested in trades? How do you get them into the industry? And then maybe after you get them in and train them, how do you retain them?
Yeah, I think a big part of that is making sure that they know that there is good money to be made in the trades early in high school. I remember in high school, I had no idea what my options were. I ended up getting a criminal justice degree because I liked the TV show CSI. That's all I knew. Yeah. And that was what we had always been trained is you're going to go to college. you can make way more money in the trades than you can with most of your college degrees.
And just a couple of years removed from it too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And most of these trades, they'll pay for you to get all of your education while you're working. So you can come out and you're making right out of high school, $23 an hour, but you're also getting all of your schooling taken care of. You have a crazy pension plan. And then 3 years later, you're making way more than any of your college graduate friends.
Are we seeing more people enter the trades?
I'm seeing it more now than I did 5 years ago, especially on our side of general contracting. We have project managers and we have superintendents, and our superintendents are the ones out there that are really putting all that work in place and managing the day-to-day construction, while our project managers are managing the financials and the contracts and everything. 5 years ago, every single person who graduated high school wanted to be a project manager. Yeah. Now I'm shocked by the amount that are coming out and saying, I want to be in the field. I want to be a superintendent. They want to be more involved with the trades. And you're seeing that even in high schools. Pasco County has tons of technical schools and options available with their magnet schools that they kind of have, where you can go and do welding, you can do this, and having those options available is fantastic.
Yeah, both of my sons took welding, which was shocking to me, and I loved it. I mean, one took computer programming and welding and decided he didn't want anything to do with computers and fell in love with welding. He's getting ready to go to college for chemical engineering, but
that wasn't an option when I was in high school. I took yearbook and debate. That wasn't.
I think I snuck into like the last year of shop, and then they got rid of shop.
Yeah, that was not.
But I think it should be a requirement for everybody.
Right? I think so too. I wish I was a much better carpenter than I am. I wish I could do some of the construction that these guys I see doing every single day do.
And I'd tell you, I had to take home ec too. So it was a good balance between like I have some decent, good woodworking skills and I can sew a button.
There we go. I did. I had to sew some boxers one day, and then I can also make a great cherry cobbler from my home ec class.
Nice. What about the supply chain? So it seems like everything is starting to normalize, or maybe has normalized. Is that an accurate perception, or are we still dealing with issues?
We're still dealing with issues, but way less than we were a year ago, 2 years ago, and 4 years ago for sure. Electrical seems to be the biggest area where we have supply chain issues. A lot of the parts for these really complicated electrical systems are still coming from China. There's massive delays in that. Thankfully, the mechanical and I guess HVAC world used to have the delays that we were seeing, but that's kind of recovered. Most of our other specialties and finishes, all of the supply chain has kind of recovered, but it's still a concern. Things that you used to be able to get in maybe 26 weeks or 34 weeks, which is still a long time after you order it, they may still be taking 56 or 76 weeks. And when you're trying to build a project in 12 months, it's really hard to get that design and then tell an owner, hey, we can build this in 12 months, but you can't get your electrical gear for 2 years. And that really stinks.
That's wild. Now, is that because of the lack of manufacturing or issues with shipping, or is it a combination of both?
A combination of both. Okay. Most of that is kind of fabricated here or in Mexico or Canada, but all of the parts are coming from China. So they're really relying on those shipments of small details and parts to show up and work. The quality has gotten worse on the products that seem to be coming from China. That's why we've done so much investment on bringing manufacturing home here to America to make sure that we can control that better. But we may get something and test it here in America, and it doesn't work the way it was supposed to. So you've waited 36 weeks to get it from China, and it doesn't do what it needs to do.
I think unfortunately we figured out, or maybe woke up to the fact during COVID, that we don't make anything here anymore.
Absolutely.
We needed things, medicine. We couldn't get medicine, and so I'm hopeful that the efforts to reshore will be successful, and unfortunately costs will probably come up, but if we get things that work and we can get it timely, and it's probably a cost worth paying for. What about cost just in general? I mean, we were waiting for the supply chain to normalize and costs to come back down, and they just seem really sticky and not seeing really any movement.
Thankfully, in the construction industry, I think it's starting to level out.
Okay.
In 2020, 2021.
The level out just flattened, so it's not increasing anymore.
It's not increasing anymore, but it's definitely not getting cheaper.
At least you can plan for stable.
And that is 100% what we're trying to do. Inflation is to be expected. We used to always be able to kind of tell an owner, hey, expect this much inflation, per quarter, until you decide to start the job, and that budget would remain steady. After 2020, there was no predicting what the market was going to tell us the price was. No matter if it was a month later, 4 months later, 8 months later.
Oh, it was wild. We were experiencing like 10, 15, 20. I mean, costs were just going through the roof, blowing through contingency.
Yep.
It was wild.
Yep. But thankfully, in the healthcare space, the last 3 contracts we've put together here locally in the Tampa region have all come in at or under budget 9 to 12 months after we put together that original budget. So
that's
thankfully,
Congratulations.
we know that we've figured it out. There's still inflation happening, but it's what we can expect. And that is awesome because then we can provide that cost certainty to anybody. And they understand that first budget that we give them is going to be the last budget that they need to get all the financing approved.
No, that goes a long way in reducing difficult conversations. And speaking of, I mean, so you're dealing with owners and architects and subs, and everybody has a different opinion. And how do you manage through that process?
It's definitely through relationships. So you have to have a teamwork attitude. We don't even consider our subcontractors. They're our trade partners. Every single person on a project is a partner to us. If they're not successful, we're not successful. Yeah. So we try to avoid all those. And there's definitely going to be times where you have to have those difficult conversations, but you know that you're all working to it together. We don't necessarily want to work with a development group that is always going to be bottom dollar and try to not pay what is earned. We want everyone to be successful. We want the developer to make money on their building. We want us to be successful in our projects. And we want all of our trade partners to make sure that at the end of the day, all of their employees are paid, they're able to keep everybody going, and that there's never any issues that can't be resolved.
Yeah, everybody's happy and working towards a common goal and working together. Is there any particular project that comes to mind that you've had some issues that you've had to overcome?
I think there's always going to be some conflict on every project, but there's nothing that we haven't been able to overcome. That is part of what JE Dunn does and sets us apart is we're never going to sacrifice a relationship for $1 somewhere. We want to be everybody's partner. And if it means that we have to pay for something that maybe we don't think we should have to pay for, or we're going to make sure it's taken care of. If an owner's not going to necessarily pay a subcontractor for work completed, we're going to pay them. If a subcontractor owes something or we miss something, we're going to make it right. And we're going to make sure that owner gets exactly what they paid for.
No, that kind of collaborative approach is probably breeds loyalty, and you want to know you've got dependable subs or trades or subcontract, just a dependable team for every project you're going in on, and not have to wonder, okay, are they going to bail on me and go up the street because someone's going to pay 10% higher? But we've got this history of I've stepped up and helped you in the past. So
absolutely.
Yeah. No. What do you think are the most critical skills for a general contractor to possess?
Problem solving.
Okay.
Problem solving and the ability to think ahead, 4 steps ahead. We don't always want to be reactionary. You always want to be planning for the future. If you're always reacting to problems, that's never a great thing. So you want to be able to look on your lessons learned and past projects to ensure that you don't have those same projects. But anything is going to pop up. And so you have to be able to make quick decisions. You have to be able to have those conversations swiftly and move forward and make sure that everybody is doing exactly what they've committed to.
Is there a kind of a post-mortem wrap-up after a project to say, okay, what was, what would do well? What can we improve on next time?
Every single time. So we do what we like to call them lessons learned all the time. And so we'll sit down with the design team. We'll sit down with our trade partners. We'll sit down with the owner, and we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page of what we can do better, what didn't go well, what did go well, and make sure that everyone, if we partner again on a project in a year, 10 years, 15 years, that we make sure that we don't do anything that was wrong a second time. You always make mistakes. Sure. Mistakes are made.
Yeah. We're people.
But you learn from them. And that's the key.
Okay. What do you think are the biggest issues facing the construction industry? We talked about labor. I know construction costs. We haven't done a lot of innovation, but maybe that's coming.
Yeah. I'd say that labor and inflation are the 2 biggest. But at the same time, we, do see issues with innovation and making sure that we are taking everything into consideration moving forward. So with the prefabrication of facilities.
Now, do you have a warehouse here that you're prefabricating things in the state somewhere?
We do not currently, but what we do is we end up getting a project, we get together the team, we figure out what we're going to prefab somewhere, and we go ahead and we get a warehouse. So everybody can work there, can do that. It's always great to have it as close to a job site as possible so that we're not having to travel staff all over the place. There are trade partners that we use, like Walmart Contracting, where they'll build exterior wall panels for buildings, and they do that in their own warehouse, and they'll bring those to our job site.
Okay.
But there are different ways to attack it, but JE Dunn currently does not have a facility here in Florida. We do in Kansas City, Atlanta, Texas, different areas where we're kind of doing a pre-built environment, but not here in Florida.
Okay. How has the design of hospitals changed over the years? And maybe I'm guessing people's needs have changed or community needs changed. So has there been an evolution in how hospitals are constructed and designed?
There has been. I mean, you're always learning from past projects and where your kind of science is leading you towards on the design. When you think of hospitals like behavioral health hospitals, it's been found that you always need to be able to see the outside. That kind of helps with the patient recovery and making sure that people can find that health that they need in order to get out of that facility.
And let the light in, because I feel like, I mean, I hate to say it, but I mean, we're in the past, they just shut people in and kind of keep them trapped and shielded from the outside environment.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things where it was one person in a room, make sure that nothing could ever happen to them, put them in a padded room. And that's always what we saw in movies. And that's just not reality. You know, all of these behavioral health hospitals have dual patient rooms. Most of these people need that friend there. They need that person to find that safe space for them and make sure that they're looking out for each other. They have to be able to see outside. They have to be able to get outside and get that natural fresh air in order to make sure that they are getting the care that they need. And so that has changed so much from that state model where it was lock them up and throw them in a padded room until they're better. Well, they never got better. Yeah. And so now we're trying to make sure that we are providing what those sick individuals need. And that's been a huge change. You also see that in how our hospitals are built because there are differing needs. So the design of large acute care hospitals have always traditionally been for ease of doctors. I remember the first hospital I built, the closest parking lot to the front entrance and to the entrance to the hospital was for doctors.
It's always
only.
Doctors, yeah.
It's always doctors. And I understand having some emergency parking spots just for emergent care if they need to get in there and get in an OR really quick. But you don't need every single doctor parking right there by the entrance. And then you have sick and injured people walking from a quarter mile away. Now, with the removal of the certificate of need here in the state of Florida, you're seeing that these health systems are having to cater more towards the patients and to the doctors, not just necessarily the doctors, because the patients don't have other options.
Okay. So that really, it's more of a focus towards the patient care, the experience, because they're being forced to compete against other institutions and not just, you want the doctors too, but the patients aren't coming. And
yeah. When you only have one hospital to go to, you know where you're going.
As you have a monopoly.
If you have 5 within 15 minutes of your house and one has really nice technology and you can pretty much order DoorDash type food from your hospital bed rather than just getting that awful meal that hospitals used to serve, that's what you're going to do. You're going to go there. You see that with kids still today as Johns Hopkins has this fantastic hospital down here in St. Pete, and it's one of the best children's hospitals that we have. People from Pasco County, from my neighborhood, will drive their children all the way down here. Well, now Johns Hopkins is going to be building a new hospital up in Pasco County. That's huge for everyone who lives by me because now we have somewhere within 15 minutes we can go if there's an emergency and not necessarily have to drive 45.
There's also been a proliferation of a bunch of the urgent care facilities, so I'm guessing maybe forcing care outside of the hospitals for cheaper care or maybe more convenient. What's happening in that space?
So that's definitely down the more convenient line, and I guess cheaper as well. So not all the time, but sometimes. But you definitely see that with nobody really wanting to travel more than 5 miles away from their house for that care. You're starting to see 5 miles. Yep. You're starting to see where you want to have those urgent care facilities, those freestanding buildings where people can get that care. Nobody wants to go to a big congested hospital if they don't have to. If you're very, very sick and something is dire, if you have some crazy sickness, you go to the best hospital you can get to. If it's a burn, if it's a broken arm, you want to get it taken care of fast. You don't necessarily want to go and park in a 6,000 car parking garage and go into the ED and sit there for 2 hours. Mm-hmm. You want to make sure that you're finding the care as fast as you can and as locally as you can. So places like TGH, they are a huge, or Tampa General Hospital, they are a huge provider of care here in the Tampa region. It is a giant hospital on Davis Islands. They used to have, I think, 17 care sites, and it was all centered in downtown Tampa and the Davis Islands. In the last few years, they've gone up to 150 care sites.
Oh, wow.
So They purchased Brevard Health up in Hernando and Citrus counties. Those are new hospitals that they are now expanding into to make sure that people can get TGH's level of care near them. And that's huge for people.
That's a ton of expansion. Really interesting.
Absolutely. And you're seeing it all over. The mergers and acquisition space and healthcare is always kind of a sticky place because the FTC wants competition. We talk about the certificate of need kind of restricting that competition, but now we've gotten rid of that. We want competition. Whenever a hospital tries to buy other hospitals, they don't necessarily like that if they're in the exact same space or if they're in the same care lines. And so you start to see these big health systems branch out. So Orlando Health and Bayfront Health partnered.
Right.
Orlando Health was in Orlando. Bayfront Health was over in St. Pete. Wasn't a huge competition issue. Now, if Orlando Health and Advent Health were to go ahead and try to merge, I'm sure there would be huge issues with that.
That would make sense. So I know you're a healthcare guy. You had touched on some of the other projects that JE Dunn is doing, some schools. And I do want to touch on the SkyConnect building at the airport. So that's where JE Dunn has your offices, right?
Absolutely. So we built that project for the Hillsborough Airport Authority. Back in 2021, it opened. They occupy, I think, 3 floors of the 9-story building. We are on the 2nd floor there, right underneath them. It's a fantastic building. It's pretty unique how that was built. I mean, that is the emergency command for the airport there. So it is a giant glass and steel building, but it is designed to withstand huge hurricanes. So all of our glass is rated at 200 miles an hour. We put an extra 600,000 pounds of steel in that structure to make sure that if anything hits it, that building is a fortress. And so we started that in October 2019, and that was one of these design build projects where we partnered with a local architect. It was HOK to deliver this building, and it has been a fantastic project. So starting that in October of 2019, right before the pandemic started, was a unique experience, but we were still able to finish right there on time, mid-2021, and get people moved in. We were their first tenant, technically. So
I hate to put you on the spot, but that was also a time of high inflation. How was the budget management process on that one?
So thankfully, all of the budgets and everything, contracts had been written prior to that.
Everything was bought out before? Okay.
So we did that. We still ran into a couple issues with manufacturers changing prices because as much as some people have contracts that they've agreed to and purchase orders, they're not always world proof. And so prices did change.
Well, they couldn't get things, right?
Exactly.
So they're sourcing from other places.
Absolutely. And so you did see that. We had procurement issues. We had to figure out ways to get the building built on time. But that team really pulled it out and knocked it out of the park.
How'd you win that project?
I was not down here for that, but I know that it was a joint effort between our kind of aviation group that's in Atlanta and our team down here. So, even though that is not a kind of airport or aviation project, it is on an active airport right there, 1,000 feet from, I think, one of the runways. So
it's kind of wild. I mean, our airport is in the middle of the West Shore district. So, I mean, there's plenty of high buildings all around anyway. But when I heard the announcement, I have all the faith in the world that our folks at the airport, but there was a little bit of skepticism there, but I mean, it is a beautiful project.
It is. And it's definitely unique building on an airport campus, putting a 300 or 220 foot crane up in the sky next to where airports are landing isn't always the easiest thing to do.
Well, success. No, you didn't take out any planes, so well done. advice to someone who wants to get into the construction industry and maybe walk the path that you've walked, what would you say?
I'd say get into it and see if you like it. I don't have necessarily the traditional background into construction.
You were preventing things from being blown up.
I was in the Army. I worked in food and beverage. I have a criminal justice degree. I didn't know I was ever going to work in construction. I tried different things and found what I loved. And I love working with people. I love seeing the skyline change. In healthcare, I love serving people and making sure that people can get their health needs figured out, I guess. And so I'd say make sure that you're trying any and everything that you may find a little interest in, and then do internships. There's nothing that can prepare you for after college life better than trying it out for a summer with no strings attached.
That's great advice and probably a good spot to leave it, unless, Jeff, you got anything else you want to add?
I don't. I appreciate you having me on. This is a blast. I appreciate everything you do and the Bank of Tampa does for the Tampa Bay region, and hopefully we can do this again sometime.
No, I look forward to it, Jeff. And thank you for welcome to the market, number one. And then number two, JE Dunn has just been a great contractor in the market, have built a number of very visible and successful projects. So thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thank you.
If you have any questions or a future show idea or would like to be a sponsor, you can send us a message at moneymarket@bankoftampa.com or find us on LinkedIn, X, Facebook, and on Instagram at Bank of Tampa and online at bankoftampa.com. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for subscribing, and we'll see you around in the money market.